Hi, it's Mary Ann. Before we get into the podcast, I want to share with you information about two upcoming events. We are thrilled to present to you a free screening of Keys, Bags, Names, Words, a documentary film about hope in aging and dementia. You're invited to watch the 85-minute documentary at your leisure. Then join us for a film discussion on Tuesday, October 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time via Zoom. Award-winning filmmaker, producer, and director Cynthia Stone and Caroline Prolu of the University of California, San Francisco Memory and Aging Center and the Global Brain Health Institute will attend the discussion to answer questions and offer insights. The link to register is in the show notes. Once registered, you will receive the link to watch the film prior to the discussion. The link to attend the discussion will be emailed to you the day before. Then on October 24th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time via Zoom, we will repeat our virtual panel discussion on everything you've always wanted to know about living with dementia but were afraid to ask, Part 2, with 5 of our authors, all living well with dementia, some for more than 10 years. This promises to be an enlightening and informative conversation with Peter Berry, Jennifer Butte, Michael Ellenbogen, Wendy Mitchell, and Herta Saunders. The link to register is also in the show notes. We hope to see you at both events. Now, on to our podcast with Susan Ostrowski from Reading to Connect.
I would give cognitive assessments and screenings to the residents and, realized, their ability to read is pretty deeply rooted, pretty automatic. They can no longer usually read in a meaningful way, newspapers, magazines, and typical books, but they still can read. That ability to read is there. It's just that they can't read A, B, and C, meaning those conventional materials. So there's a difference there. So then I went online and I quickly sought books for this population, and there were only a handful, and I bought them and I looked at them and I didn't really like them, but I tried them out and they did not go over well. Most people were just like, all right, that wasn't worth much. They tended to be juvenile. They tended to be clinically appropriate. So they might have italicized print and a blue background and all these kind of clinical things that were not being considered.
Welcome to the All's Authors podcast. We're so glad you found us. We're the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. I'm Mary Ann Shuko, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter.
And I'm Christy Byrne-Yates, a licensed educational psychologist, dementia daughter, OWL's author, and coach focused on the sandwich generation. Please join us for bi-weekly episodes with our authors as we talk about their dementia journeys, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help others currently on that path.
We hope these stories offer you comfort and support as we strive to break the silence and stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis.
May one of our authors speak to your experience.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, I'm Jean Lee from All's Authors. All the resources we offer at allsauthors.com, including this podcast, are brought to you free of charge. Our management team is a dedicated group of passionate volunteers who earn no financial compensation. But to continue our mission to provide valuable resources to dementia caregivers, we need the support of listeners like you. If you'd like to support us, please make a donation at allsauthors.com/donate. We are a 501c3 organization. Remember, you are not alone.
Hi, Marianne. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Christy, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm really excited about our guest this week because Susan has created this gift for people who have dementia that will enable them to enjoy reading once again.
That's exactly. And because we are Al's authors and we are all about books, I'm excited too because I'm a reader. I know you're a reader, and we definitely reach out to readers. So this is so great to get to hear how she's helping folks with dementia and cognitive impairments really stay connected to print, to reading, to books. So I'm excited too. I want to hear how she got started and where she's taking this. So this will be fascinating.
Yeah, and she's perfectly qualified because she has a master's in remedial reading and a master's in speech pathology from Columbia University. She's a speech language pathologist, and she's worked in the long-term care setting and with people who have dementia over the years, which is what inspired her to get this started.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also I always love meeting up with people who are in areas that I fully understand and enjoy. And having worked in the schools as a school psychologist, I work with a lot of speech paths. So they are always my best friends. So this is going to be exciting. We'll be learning a lot from her. So it'll be fun to see how she's done this. And so pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Her program is called Reading to Connect, and that's the number 2. So Let's get started.
Yep.
Hi, Susan. Welcome to the All's Authors podcast. How are you today?
Hi, fine. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're very excited to talk to you today about your reading program. And I have Christy with me as well. Hi, Christy.
Hi, Marianne. Hi, Susan. It's great to meet you. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Thank you.
I'm going to start off because I have been a lifelong reader. My mom used to tell a story when I was in first grade. I'd been in school for about 3 weeks, and I came home and I was in a fit. And I said I was never going back to school again. And she wanted to know what happened. And I said, I've been going to school for 3 weeks and I still can't read and I still can't write. So that was just all I ever wanted to do was be able to read. And then, of course, realized that I could write too. So that was my thing as a kid. I was always reading a book. I loved books. I would love to own a book. My library card, visiting the library with my dad. Those were some of the better times in my childhood. We grew up in a house full of books. So I just can't imagine if I were no longer able to sit and read and enjoy a book. So I really commend you for what you're doing for people who have cognitive impairment, because if they've been, lovers of reading and books, that is something that is probably missing from their life and very sad. Mm-hmm. So thank you for creating this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Same here. I was always a reader, and my mom was a school teacher. So she taught third grade. So she did a lot of helping kids really polish up their reading. And that was always her thing, and with grandkids, it was always, Grandma, read. And she would read with everybody. Mm. And I do remember, and Susan, my parents both had dementia, and my dad was a reader, but not quite like my mom was. And that was a thing that was very special between my mom and I, is that we would read in high school and college, we were reading some of the same things. And we would, like, if we got into a series, it was, we'd fight over who got the next one, when it came out, who got to read it first. And, but she definitely lost that ability to read. That was one of the things that I noticed. She'd be reading the same book every day that I saw her, and it was on the same page. And she lost that ability to stay in the reading. And I know it was hard for her. She couldn't pass her driver's license exam through taking the written test. She had to take it orally because she couldn't really comprehend she was reading. So I really am interested to hear what you're doing too. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So maybe we can start there. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this and what led you to develop some of your works that are helping people with cognitive impairments read?
Sure. The first thing I'll say is that I was unlike you two in your childhood in that I was raised in a house with no books. We had the World Book Encyclopedia set, of course, and we had a few, I remember them vividly, 2 Bobbsey Twin books and a couple of Sammy Blue Jay. I don't know if you remember those, Thornton Burgess. Anyway, and so I read them over and over. So I was different in that. So I grew up in a family of 12 children. Wow. Outside of Boston. And it was just like very practical and just nobody really read for pleasure. But then my mother did get us like a library card and the bookmobile, and that was my refuge. I just soaked it up. But then when I became an adult and had, went through education and was a new mother. My husband was an English professor, and being with him slowly gave me permission to read mainly fiction. But for the longest time in my life, it was something I craved, but I felt guilty. It was like a guilty pleasure. And over the years, I've discovered that I wasn't alone with that. When you grow up in a very practical, hardworking, blah, 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 people don't read. Interestingly, now that my mom, she happens to have early dementia, she's 90, early to mid, she's had it for a while, and she's reading like crazy, and she never read before. So it's all I love to talk about people's relationship to reading. So how did I get into it? So I'm a speech pathologist. I worked with children a lot. I have a degree in remedial reading and then a degree, of course, in speech, and I love that. And then in my late 40s, I sort of fell into, for a couple of reasons, into the senior living realm. And I was appalled. I had never been in long-term care personally or career-wise. And like so many people, I was just, what is going on? Where I grew up, we knew our grandparents and great-grandparents. They lived with us in many times. Older people were not a part of the society to be put somewhere. That just wasn't in my experience, etc. So I'm sure it isn't in anybody's really. So I thought, okay, I'm going to keep my mind and heart open. And if there's anything I can do before I leave this earth to help this space, I'm going to watch out for it. And it came relatively quickly. I would give cognitive assessments and screenings to the residents and, realized, oh, yeah, their ability to read is pretty deeply rooted, pretty automatic. They can no longer usually read in a meaningful way, newspapers, magazines, and typical books, but they still can read. That ability to read is there. It's just that they can't read A, B, and C, meaning those conventional materials. So there's a difference there. So then I went online and I quickly sought books for this population, and there were only a handful, and I bought them and I looked at them and I didn't really like them, but I tried them out and they did not go over well. Most people were just like, all right, that wasn't worth much. And they tended to be juvenile. They tended to be just dry and boring. Or they weren't clinically appropriate. So they might have italicized print and a blue background and all these kind of clinical things that were not being considered. So I just started working with residents, so many residents in various settings, and a doctor came together. We got together and really, really pieced out what was needed. Nurses, a lot of occupational therapists, a whole team of us. So we came up with this format that really sort of cuts through all that cognitive mush that's covering this pearl of this ability to read. And by that, I'm the cognitive problems. I mean, like organizational thought and sustained focus and working memory and simultaneous processing. So I know I'm going on too long.
No, I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated because, as I told you, that's my background. I'm a licensed educational psychologist, but I'm like totally eating this up. It's so great, and we don't think about that. We don't think about how complicated it can be. Like the working memory is a big piece, and that simultaneous processing, and very simple things you just mentioned, like the type of print, like what does italics mean to us when we're reading? What does our brain, we've learned, if we're not in cognitive decline, we've learned what that means. Oh, this is special. Pay attention to it a little differently. There's just a whole lot of meaning in that. And just the ability to read it, to see it and actually recognize it as the same letter kind of thing. So yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, because reading is, in a way, it's so automatic, but in a way, it has all these piles of things when you open up a typical book, all these piles of skills that have to be right on. Right. Because we've all sort of, isn't it fascinating? We've all sort of, as a humanity, have come to decide what's a good length for a sentence, right? About 20 words, I think, 20, 30 words, something like that. If you read a sentence of 100 words, you wouldn't be able to do it because you need the organization on the paper of punctuation, paragraphs, chapters, titles, because we have, cognitive limitations as well.
Yeah, it's kind of the difference between reading, say, Herman Melville and Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah. Right. So and we did actually kind of look at that, and we've looked at that with my husband and others. Like, are there authors who have a style of writing that is more easily absorbed for people living with dementia? And syntax is a big thing. And so straight, kind of short, direct syntax like Hemingway definitely is the way to go. But yeah.
So when you started with this, you were working with a population at a particular facility or care home or whatever, and you rolled it out there. What was that like?
Yeah, so it was a fancy life plan community, but fancy in terms of the chandeliers and the rugs, but the quality of life of these people was, still like,
yeah.
And the activities people were running around with massive, expectations that they could never fulfill. So yeah, we just tried with families and so forth. We just started creating material that residents liked, that meant something to them. And then we'd do lots of field testing and back and forth. What made it better for them. And basically, I just watched them and whatever they needed help with, whatever stumped them, whatever made them falter, I just tried to think, what could be better? What could we do either in the environment or the material to make it to get rid of that barrier. And then, so to answer your question, Mary, so that was great. And then we went to 6 memory care and health centers in Connecticut and just gave them the books, and then, got their feedback.
It's fascinating. It's really great. And so where are you now with promoting this in different organizations? How's that going?
Yeah, so 2020, January, I partnered with an organization called Agucate, AGEUCATE, and they're a great organization that brings programs and training to all kinds of providers. So they have a program called Compassionate Touch and one called Dementia Live. And so Reading to Connect is one of their programs. So we collaborate to get the word out. We've had the most success with CMP grants. I don't know if you know those, but every state has grant money that comes from the penalties that a nursing home may have to pay because of not following regulations, et cetera. So that money gets pooled into a fund for the state, and then that money can only be used to go back into the nursing homes of their state. So, and it's overseen by CMS, Center of Medicare Medicaid Services. So a program like mine is a good, they like these kinds of programs. So we've been very successful getting it out that way. And then libraries have been very interested.
That's great.
Yeah.
So did you write original material in books, or did you adapt previous works somehow?
Yeah, so most of it it's basically all the books are not. We have over 50 booklets, always coming up with more. Most of them are basically 90% of them are nonfiction. So I might take at the beginning, I took sort of high interest topics like, sports or pets or travel. And I might think of what I did before COVID was I'd think about a topic and then I'd go around with my laptop and I'd have images of that topic. And I just sit with people and just scroll through the images and listen to them and listen to where their thoughts went. What did these stimulate? What was it? Was there anything? I remember I did one on baking bread. I thought this will be perfect. Like everybody bakes bread. And it didn't do much. And I looked at the pictures and they were all the same, they're tan, right? They're different shades of tan. There wasn't much to it. And then I just shifted to cookies and everybody, people just exploded. Like everybody had topics about cookies, Christmas cookies and secret recipes and what cookies meant to them.
How interesting. How absolutely fascinating, right? Because bread is kind of all about one color, right? So
plus it's work, like cookies is fun. Cookies is dessert.
Cookies is more creative, maybe. I don't know. But image is really important. Illustrations are really important for this population in general.
Mm-hmm. So can you show us what one of the books looks like?
Sure. So, here's a favorite.
Okay, I'm going to describe it so the listeners, because they can't see it, but the people watching the video can. So Susan is showing us a photograph of an adorable little baby with big blue eyes, and it's probably less than 1 year old, and it says above it, babies.
Yeah. Hmm. So every book has, as you can see, this. So these are 3 elements. So you have on the left page, and again, it's not a formula, but it's what we found works really well. So you have text on the left page, and on the right page, you have a easy to identify, engaging photo. At least we try. And then you have a banner that just sort of focuses right in, like, what is this all about? So every set of facing pages, they call it stands alone. So somebody can open up the book in the middle or the beginning or the end, and they can get something out of it. But at the same time, it has to be thematic. A lot of books that are written like this, they'll have like one page is about Thanksgiving, the next page is about sledding in the snow, the next page is about rabbits. I don't know. And that's very hard for people. We found that if you go on with the same topic, you know this, Christy, they don't have to pull up that whole schemata again every time they turn the page. They're having one topic swirling around in their brains, babies. And while they're looking at many images and reading some text, things are coming forward, personal things.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I love that the entire book then, like you said, you could open it up anytime, anywhere, and we're still in that conversation about babies somehow. So that's beautiful. And I like, and also that consistency of the left page and the right page being set up that way, the text and then the picture. I'm absolutely right. The illustrations and pictures are so meaningful. And then that banner, just, bringing it all together. So that's really brilliant. It's great.
Yeah. Can you read us that text that goes with that page? It's so the text, you're going to read the text on the left, and then on the right, there's a photo of a pregnant woman standing in the water, and it says in the banner, expecting. She's like at the beach or something with her, showing us her baby bump.
Yep. So there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 sentences. The sentences are isolated, so the space between each sentence. It says, I am unsteady on land. I move slowly. I can no longer bend over. But in the water, I float freely. And I think of you floating inside of me.
That's very sweet.
Now, I have to say, I actually didn't write this book. This was a book written by a woman who's kind of a storyteller and a poet. And so she and I worked together. Like I gave her she did great. She also did a book, Jewish Reflections. So I would pick out the pictures. I've done this with a few of the books. I'd pick out the pictures, give her a whole bunch, like maybe 20, 30 pictures. And I'd say, now pick out what you want and write what you want. So I can't take credit for that at all. She did a beautiful job.
Okay. Share another one.
Okay. Well, this is a little heavier one. So like I said, we started with top high interest topics, and then we went to more culturally specific, like Jewish reflections, the Korean War. I just did one on gay rights, the history of gay rights through the 20th century. I did one recently on Japanese American story. So Pope John Paul II, that kind of stuff, which has been really great. People have really, so this one I'm going to read a little bit is Rosa Parks.
Okay.
So one of the pages is this.
Okay, so it's bus segregation with a photo of people on a bus segregated by race.
Yep. In the 1950s, Montgomery, Alabama had very specific bus segregation rules. The front rows of every bus were reserved for white passengers. However, if white people needed more seats, then Black passengers had to move back or stand or get off the bus. In addition, Black people had to pay at the front of the bus and then get off and re-enter the bus at the back. And that's a page.
Wow.
And so I'm sure that would elicit like a lot of conversation or people's reminiscences of that time because they had lived through that.
Yeah. Yeah. We have gotten so much positive feedback from these books that deal with more cultural issues and hard issues and things, because the staff, and I'm talking about long-term care, but the staff people really appreciate it because they feel like, oh, here's a framework where we can talk about this, right? Everybody can usually absorb something from it, whether it's just the pictures and the banners or the text. The text is to the point, but I always try to make it life affirming. I don't want it to be harsh, but I want it to be respectful of the experience of what happened.
And I think pulling topics that do have an emotional component to them are ones that, because that emotional component is another thing that really stimulates memory, right? That really, we remember things that we have an emotional connection to. So you mentioned Korean War, and I'm thinking, my dad was a Korean War era vet. Like that would have been something that would have been very interesting for him. I joke that the last year of my parents' life, I think they relived and watched everything about World War II. They always had the History Channel on, and they were watching World War II over and over and over again. But that's where they were stuck. That was kind of their childhood. That's what they remember, growing up in the Depression and then the war. And my dad liked anything military because he had been in the Navy. He had been a pilot he wasn't in the Korean War, but that era. It's fascinating how they would gravitate towards that. So I can see those kinds of topics would be very interesting for people. It'll be interesting to see going forward, as people are aging, right? I'm in the baby boomer generation. It's like, wow, are you going to have a book about hippies? Because that would be something that I would remember from my childhood, right? Interesting.
Or maybe, the World Trade Center. I mean, what will be... Because these things that I mentioned, the kind of more substantial topics and the deep topics, people really do light up. Like you could see their body. Now you have to watch. You don't want to cause them to get upset. And we talk about that in our training, how to carefully, step by step until you feel like this is a positive thing and not a negative thing. But you see their bodies light up. And I think it's because, those were the things of their, that stirred a lot of emotions in their past. And so, and there's something very acknowledging, they feel very recognized. Like with the Korean War, like I said, I always make sure it's like a life affirming and positive. But that was hard with the Korean War. So what I did was I went over the nuts and bolts of it, but then I went where every page had a Korean War memorial, whether it was in South Korea or here in the States. And that was fascinating. Like, how was the memorial designed? Who contributed to it? What was the symbolism there? So by the end of the book, you've read about 6 or 7 memorials, and that seemed to do the trick. Like,
sure,
uplifting.
Well, I appreciate your sensitivity towards the topics too, because you're right. I mean, it could cause or elicit agitation. If it were like how would you handle something like the World Trade Center, or like I'm thinking Vietnam, like where do you go with that one, right? But I do love that you are connecting to that generation's meaningful times, because again, that I think is something that isn't a way to engage. And I appreciate that you're being so sensitive with how you construct that it's not a position paper, it's an engagement paper, an engagement activity.
Yeah, it's not, I learned quickly, a paragraph from Wikipedia does not cut it. Nobody wants to read.
When you were going through these exercises with people, has anybody ever told you anything about a time in history that contradicted what you knew of that time?
Oh, that's a really good question. Gosh, I can't. I'm sure.
Yeah. Because, like, for instance, like the Rosa Parks, if you started a conversation was started that was about civil rights. And I mean, I just can't even imagine some of the things that might pop out of people's minds of their memories of that time, whether they were Black or white, and experienced it in a completely different level or wherever they came from. Because, people usually don't end up where they came from. So they bring a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think you could learn a lot from these people.
Absolutely. That's what's so cool about if it's a high quality book, which we try so hard, is that it really does open up a door for them. So they've got the basic lexicon, right, Christy, that's there. So they don't have to struggle with word finding. They've got the images. They've got this night. I always say it's like a walker. Someone who has trouble walking with a walker, right? It gives, and that's what reading in this form does. It gives them voice. It's a walker for talking in a way.
Yeah, no. And I love that question, Marianne. I wonder that'd be fascinating to sort of look at as you progress and keep going, there may be a research paper or a book about that, right? People's reactions and what we can learn from people's reactions to how they respond to this. Yeah, that's fascinating. But
have you done any videos or anything when you were doing your sessions to that you could? Are they on your website? Is there something people could see that they could witness the interactions and what transpires?
Yeah. So before COVID, most of those the ones on our website are pretty much before COVID, and then. But in the last year, we've had a lot of grants, and I've gone out to the sites and helped them with the training and so forth, mostly in Virginia, Tennessee as well, and Colorado. And so, we've been able to videotape a lot, which is wonderful. And a lot of them are on my LinkedIn page. One of the videos is a Black man and a white man reading the Rosa Parks book. Oh. It's really precious. It's.
Oh, I would love to see that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be really interesting. I'd love to see that.
No, you're right. And that's the thing about this is that everybody's kind of like, I can't picture this. I need to see it. I need to. So I'll go out and do demonstrations or just the videos sometimes, and they're like, oh, I get it. I see how this,
Yeah, because I think there's the preconception that everything is lost and not to be found. So, and I think a lot of people tend to take it away from people prematurely, and thinking that this person can't possibly understand or can't possibly do that, whatever that is. And maybe they can. And then we just become learned helplessness. That's, I think, the phrase that, when you learn enough that people say, oh, well, you can't do that. And you think you can't do that. So you don't do that.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And it's a very closed-minded kind of approach. And
right.
So our program is based on Montessori principles, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You're both. So it's this idea, Maria Montessori had this, she wrote complicated, like her books are wonderful and everything. She was very complicated methodology, but basically the one crux of it is, she's talking about children and students in school, and she's saying they need three things to learn. They need accessible materials that they can manage independently. They need an environment that allows them, is conducive to learning and interacting with the materials. And they need, a teacher, a guiding person But where she took it a step further even was to say, if we do this right with the materials, if the materials are truly appropriate and challenging in just the right way for the student, and if the environment is truly for them, then the role of the teacher, that third element, becomes less and less. In fact, one of my favorite lines from her is, the teacher's presence is barely felt, meaning if learning really is happening. And so we took that with Reading to Connect. So in our training, we talk about, okay, here are the materials that are pretty accessible in many ways. And then we also provide book stands so that people maybe don't have to, if they have a hard time holding the book or managing it, they're just book stands at an angle. And just looked at the, we talk about in the training how to really look at the environment. How dementia friendly is it? Is there postural support? Is there lighting? Is there, noise? And are the people who are in the reading group, are they close enough to hear each other and see each other? Or are they looking across a table that seats 8, which is so problematic. So a big part of the program is not only the reading, but it's inviting people who are living with dementia to come together in a group, each with a copy of the same book, and then just organically explore the book together without a leader.
Okay, that's great. And so then you actually train the staff or any folks that are coming in to help out. Could be volunteers, I guess. Could be service providers, right? Who do you then train to help them or orient them to how to use the materials?
So like I said, we have multiple programs, and depends on the setting. So besides long-term care, like memory care, skilled, and adult day centers, that's kind of one program, one training. And then there's libraries, and then there's care partners, which could be volunteers, companions, or family members in a one-to-one situation. We also have programs for like museums and botanical gardens and those public spaces to make them more dementia friendly using accessible literature. And then we also have a program for worship spaces. So there's all these things. So the programs are basically a collection of books and training. So the content of the training and the number of the books depends on the setting.
Got it.
So with long-term care, anybody can take that training. You're right. It can be activity staff. It can be volunteers, whomever. And then, but the training is about a lot of it is how to integrate reading, not just have one activity, but really integrate independent and in many cases, social reading for the residents of, who live there. It's not really a staff-led activity.
Yeah, no, I see that. And I mean, I just am thinking of all the other applications for these materials, right? I'm like you mentioned, botanical gardens or museums, and to have that be dementia friendly is such a gift to families wanting to do activities to keep family members involved. But I can also see that being something that's accessible then to a young adult with cognitive disabilities who could access information about what's going on there at another level, because a lot of those little placards in a museum or whatever, not at all accessible, right? It's hard to read, it's too complicated, it's tiny print.
In museums are coming up with dementia-friendly programs and tours and so forth. So what I would love to see is that they end or maybe start, but eventually have a booklet that highlights the exhibits and just some text and stuff so that they can take it home and talk about it and really remember it. Otherwise, that experience may not last too long in their working memory.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's wonderful. What a wonderful gift. That's great. Do you have any topics that you are excited about right now that you're currently working on or you want to dig into and create new books? What are some of the things on your horizon?
That's a really great question. So one of the things we do again is think about not only can people with dementia, like say in a library, come together and run their own group, their own reading group, but also people with dementia being leaders. So, so I've created a few like trivia books where somebody's reading out the trivia and people are guessing, and that's good. And then there's some song lyrics, and then there's one on like a comedy hour, like one-liners from the masters, the Benny Goodman and those folks. So to take that further, I am creating a book that can lead a group in basically meditation, a basic relaxation meditation thing. So someone with dementia can be, given the microphone, literally and figuratively, and be the leader of that group.
That's great. Wow. I could see that being really powerful. And oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Just things like that, or exercise leader. And then, but then I am absolutely doing more current things too, like Vietnam and like rock and roll and, yeah.
That's so cool.
I can imagine that you would have in this type of population a lot of retired leaders like teachers and professional people who have probably put all that away and can now reach back and use it. And that's so empowering.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in our package, if you will, that is supporting material, our book stands, but also a voice amplifier. And what we found when you give someone a voice amplifier, it's very simple headset with the microphone, and then, it's a wireless speaker. And everybody knows what a microphone is, right? Everybody remembers. And some people they just blossom. They just and they have had experience leading groups and so forth. And also it's very, it's empowering, but it's also saying, we want to hear you. We want to hear your voice.
But that's also great for the participants too, because along with cognitive impairment, there's also hearing. Can be natural aging process may have also diminished hearing or hard of hearing, and for sure, and I'm preaching to the choir because you know this, but being in a room where you can actually hear what's being said is so important to learning. And when you can't hear it, you're disconnected. It's just, the connection between memory and auditory issues is also pretty strong. And, people get older folks, sometimes any age person might get resistant to wearing hearing aids or might not have really great ones or losing them. And so being in a day center or room, maybe at a facility or something, being able to hear that person who's talking to you in a workshop is so important. So important.
Yeah. And same if everybody has a copy of the same book. In our program, we provide multiple copies so that if you do have a hard time hearing, but you've got the print, you've got the context, you've got the print, it's all about connecting people living with dementia with each other, not being relied on, having to rely on somebody else. So the voice amplifier, the books, the book stands, the Montessori approach, all that makes it conducive. Usually just some really nice, organic, authentic socialization.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's great.
Yeah. How do people find these books? Where would they go to get them?
The website, our website, which is readingtoconnect.com.
Mm-hmm.
Reading to Connect, the number 2 for 2. Now, we don't provide the books. We don't just sell the books, but we provide programs. So depending on your setting, we would give the information of how you get the training with the booklets. And you can pick out any of the books that you see on our website, any books that you want. It's not like a set package.
Yeah, wow, that's really great. That's good to know. That's fantastic. Do you train others to be trainers, or do you yourself go out and do all the trainings?
No. So the training, most of the training is done through Educate, which is a video that we created that has modules and things like that. That's self-paced that they can train. Almost all our training is online. If I have a library slot and there's a few libraries together, then I'll do that online, but interactive and live. And then some companies want the staff people to have the training, the online training, but then they appreciate if myself or this other Reading to Connect Educate representative goes out to the care communities and gives what we call a practicum. So they've had the online training in theory, and then we put it in practice.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful.
Perfect. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners before we say goodbye?
I think you've covered it. I mean,
okay.
I don't know. You decide whether to keep this in, but the books are printed on washable, tear-resistant paper.
Mm-hmm.
You can spill coffee on them; it'll wipe right off. It's the same paper that is used in naval ships and submarines.
Oh, that's very
fascinating. Cool. I think that's super cool. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, because they can get a beating. And so it's real. I mean, I think they're basically unterrible. Like they're just, so if they get really beat up or drinks and so forth. We wanted people to be able to really own them and to have coffee and tea with them and, not be afraid, not treat them too delicately.
Oh, that's very well thought. That's great. I mean, what a great nugget of I think that's so cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. Oh, Susan, it's so nice to see you today and to hear all about this beautiful program you've created. It sounds wonderful. And you did send me a book a while back. We had a conversation, if you remember. You sent me a book, I think, like a sample book. And the book that you sent me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the book you sent me was called England. And I was getting ready to go on a trip to England to see my daughter. Remember that? And you didn't know that, right? And you just plucked a book out of the pile. Yeah. Send this one to Marianne, and it was the England book. So that was like incredible. That was funny.
But what a wonderful gift to some of our folks who are really, not needing to, but wanting to stay in touch with reading. If that was a pleasurable activity or just something that's, like you said, more than just sitting in a space with nothing.
Yeah, criminal. Yeah. I mean, we need it all, right? We need books in that space. We need music. We need art. Yes. We need plants, children.
Yes. Well, this has been incredibly fascinating. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate that. And I applaud what you're doing and how you're approaching this. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an All's Authors podcast. For more details on this episode, please see the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review. and subscribe to it on whichever platform you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information on Al's Authors, please visit alsauthors.com. While you're there, be sure to browse our online bookstore, where you will find hundreds of carefully vetted books on Alzheimer's and dementia. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please email your thoughts on the podcast to alsauthors@gmail.com. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, totally reliant on donations to do what we do. If our authors' stories move you, please consider contributing to our cause. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony.
Hi, my name is Christy Byrne Yates, and I'm one of over 300 authors of alsauthors.com. Al's Authors is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing valuable resources to those with dementia and those caring for someone with dementia, such as Alzheimer's. I'm also a donor to Al's Authors. I chose to participate in the monthly donation program because for me, it's easy and efficient. You can donate one time, monthly, or annually. Simply go to alsauthors.com/donate. So why do I donate? Let me tell you. The management team at Al's Authors is such a dedicated and passionate group of volunteers who receive no financial compensation for their hard work. They've gathered and promoted amazing authors who share about their journeys authentically and in many forms. There are books for children, professionals, family caregivers, and for those who've been diagnosed with some form of dementia. Al's Authors also produces rich content that is completely free through podcasts, special events, and a vibrant YouTube channel. Please consider donating to Al's Authors today by going to alsauthors.com/donate. And remember, you are not alone.